There's probably going to be some bad language in this, so you might not want to let the kids watch. What is going on, winos and winettes? The wino is back here with the preview, predictions, and a few little betting tips for the Ultimate Fighter Season 29 finale card, headlined by Edson Barboza and Giga Chikadze. What a fight that's going to be. Now, when I talk about betting odds, I'm going to be using the Australian method, where we just tell you how many dollars you get back per dollar you spend. If someone's at $2, that means if I bet $1, I get $2 back. That's basically plus 100 for you Americans. I don't know why Americans do this plus 100, minus 100 thing, just adding an extra step to make things more confusing. But going ahead, that's what I'm going to be doing. And first thing we need to note about the card is, well, there are a whole bunch of injury fallouts and COVID problems and stuff like that. But for the Ultimate Fighter season, the biggest one of note is that Tresean Gore had to pull out. He had a bum knee. So our middleweight finale is now Bryan Battle versus Gilbert Urbina. Now, there's a bit of a story on this card when it comes to the picks and the betting lines and everything like that. And that is that there's a lot of really close-ish fights where I'm leaning towards the favourite, but I'm not seeing the value in the line on the favourite. I see more value in the underdog. And both of the Ultimate Fighter fights are exactly in that situation. The bantamweight fight is between Ricky Tercios and Brady Heastand, and I am leaning Ricky, but he's at $1.60 right now, whereas Brady's at $2.35. Now, the reason I was leaning Ricky, and still am to a degree, like I rewatched the Ultimate Fighter fights for all the finalists yesterday to do a bit more of a rundown of them, and going in and still afterwards I thought Ricky had beat Brady because he's a little bit more well-rounded. Brady's more the grappler, Ricky's more the striker. They're both well-rounded in a lot of respects, but it seems like Ricky's grappling is better than Brady's striking. And also, Ricky has about twice the experience of Brady. I believe Ricky's 10-2 and Brady's 5-1, so it's pretty much exactly double the resume. That being said, Brady did take on a couple of veterans in the house, Josh Reddinghouse and Vince Murdoch, both with much longer resumes than he has, and he beat them both there, so you can't read too much into that. And the threat for Brady is going to be his grappling. He's very aggressive with his grappling, very active. He sets a really high pace, but he did show, especially in the first fight with Reddinghouse, that he had that high pace and he looked like he was already getting tired by the end of the first round. He did lose the second round. And then the third, even though he still looked tired, he still had the ability to fight while tired and to keep pushing that pace and to completely out-grapple Josh in the third. So I do see him pushing a high pace. I do see him having some issues trying to keep that pace in terms of his cardio, but he has shown that he can fight through bad cardio. So once again, Ricky showed that he has pretty good takedown defense, and he's got some good grappling once you get him to the ground, transitioning and sweeping and everything like that. And at $1.60, though, I just do not see the value in Ricky. If you're going to make a bet on this card, I would put it on Brady, but me personally, I'm steering clear. So Brady at $2.35, there's some really good value there. I'm picking Ricky to win, but at $1.60, I would not be confident. When it comes to the middleweights, it was kind of similar. I was pretty high on Gilbert before rewatching the fights. Gilbert is at $2.40 right now, and Bryan Battle is at $1.57. So I was thinking, I was picking Gilbert before rewatching the fights, and I was thinking, a guy I'm picking at $2.40, that seems like some good value. I was thinking of putting some money on it straight up. Now, it's a little hard to find their fights prior to the Ultimate Fighter because they were in smaller leagues, and some of the stuff's on Fight Pass, but not all of it. And It can be hard to find those fights. So mostly what I had to go off were the fights in the house, fight-wise, and then their records and their stats and everything like that. And I just thought Gilbert had a higher strength of resume, especially that his only loss was to Sean Brady, and I'm really high on Sean Brady. And also that he seemed quite well-rounded. Like, he's more of a grappler, but he seemed quite willing to stand and strike, which is the same with Battle, but he's more wanting to strike, but he's got good grappling too. But then I checked his resume out a bit, and it seems like he's a bit of a sneaky grappler. Like, his most common method of victory is by submission. He beat two good grapplers in the house, Cameron and then Andre Petrosky, who was supposedly the best grappler in the house. And he subbed Petrosky, so he had a decision and a sub in the house. So even if you add his fights in the house to his regular record, submission is by far the most method of victory he gets. And the more I watched the fights, the more I was kind of coming around to Battle more. And look, this one I'm finding almost impossible to pick because they're both really rangy. They're both well-rounded. But after rewatching the fights, I'm probably leaning Battle a little, but mainly just because there was more to watch out of his one. Because Gilbert finished Michael Gilmore almost immediately in the first round of his first fight. And then he got knocked out by Trayshawn in the second. But Trayshawn landed with some really heavy power early on in that fight and got the respect of Gilbert and totally threw him off his game, much like you saw with Ryder in Trayshawn's first fight. And I don't think Battle has that power that Trayshawn did. I'm almost finding it impossible to pick a winner in this, mainly just because of lack of information and everything like that. But for that reason, once again, $1.57 for Battle. I'm just not saying it's too much risk of Gilbert being able to beat him for not enough return on the 157. Whereas $2.40 for Gilbert, look, I think he's in with a really good chance. They've got similar records. I believe Gilbert's got one extra win, and they're both pretty young in their career, and they both look great in the house. So to be that big an underdog, I do think there's some value there, but much like with the bantamweight fight, me personally, I'm steering clear of putting a head-to-head bet on this particular fight. So, my picks to win the Ultimate Fighter finale are both the betting favourites, Ricky and Battle, but it's razor thin in both of them. And hey, look, if you want to make some money, if my semi-final picks are anything to go by, I went 0-4. I got all the semi-final picks wrong for this Ultimate Fighter. So, me picking the favourites, definitely probably is value there on the underdogs if you want to jump on them. Just saying. The only other fight from cast members on this card is Andre Petrosky versus Michael Gilmore. Both Team Ortega. Petrosky, Ortega's #1 pick, versus Gilmore, the guy who came in as injury replacement when Huntsinger injured his leg. Look, I'm picking Petrosky in this one, not based on a whole lot of information, just mainly based off what we saw in the show. But he's at $1.18, and Gilmore's at $4.75. So I don't have the confidence to put anything down on Gilmore because he really didn't show me anything worth betting on him for. But hey, look, if you like to have a gamble, he's at $4.75. When we don't have a lot of info on either guy, it might be worth a bit of a flutter. Whereas Petrosky, I am picking him, but I'm not putting anything down on him at 118. Head-to-head anyway, might throw him on a multi. All right, so now we got to break down the main event. I mean, usually I'd break down the main event first, but since, I've been doing the Tough 29 reviews and this is the finale card, I thought I'll just quickly run through those tough fighters first. But this main event, man, Barboza versus Giga, what a meeting of kickboxers. My God. When Giga won his last fight, that's what I was on. I was like, I want to see him fight Barboza or I want to see him fight Yair in his next one. like, let's not test him too much with the wrestling right now. Let's just enjoy some good kickboxing matchups. There's going to be plenty of well-rounded guys for him to test him in the top 10 of the featherweights. So let's keep enjoying some fun striking battles for a little while. And that's what they're giving us with Barboza. Now, I have loved how Barboza has looked ever since he's gone down to featherweight. Personally, I think he's undefeated at featherweight. The Ige fight, his first fight at featherweight, watching live, I thought he won that. And then before his fight with Burgos, I went through that fight again, just doing some scouting and analysing and stuff. And yeah, even watching it with a more analytical mind frame, I still definitely thought that Barboza won the Ige fight. So I think he's undefeated at featherweight. His opponents have been better than Giga's. He's beaten Burgos. I say he's beaten Ige. And he's beaten Makwan and Mirkani. Mirkani's probably the lesser of those three. But the only guy on a level with any of them that Giga's beaten is Cub. And look, you'd probably put Cub above them. You definitely would in terms of his resume, what he's done. And Cub, he did lose to Burgos, didn't he? I kind of forget. I'm just having a bit of a blank there. But look, he's up around that level. But the rest of Giga's UFC career, look, it actually started a little slow. He's a more decorated kickboxer than Barboza. They're both coming in with heavy kickboxing games. Giga, the more decorated kickboxer. But Barboza is the more decorated mixed martial artist, and he's been at it for a lot longer. He's fought much higher competition, as I just mentioned, at featherweight, but also up at lightweight. He's fought absolute beasts up there. And as I was just getting into, Giga's starting the UFC, getting his footing in MMA and elite MMA being the UFC, it was a little slow going. He lost his fight on the Contender Series against Austin Sprinter, who we haven't seen too much from since. He got a few more wins, and then he did get the call-up. He won a split decision over Brandon Davis in his debut. You can't read too much into debuts. You got the octagon jitters and everything like that. But Brandon Davis, look, he's a good fighter, but he's not a world beater. And he took Giga to a split. Jamal Emmers, who's also on this card lower down, he took Giga to a split. And I remember a few other fights as he was making his way up the ranks where it's just like we were expecting more from him and he just wasn't getting his groove. But he certainly has found that groove in the last few fights. Capped off by that first round, maybe even first minute knockout with the Giga kick to Cub Swanson that really announced himself on the stage. So not only are these two kickboxers going against each other, they're two kick-heavy kickboxers. Barboza, the master of the leg kick, he may be the only fighter in the UFC to have more than one UFC win by leg kick knockout. And Giga, look, he's got leg kicks too, but he's all about the body kick, the Giga kick. It's actually called the Giga kick. It's just a kick to the liver, which kickboxers all over the world do, but he can do it really well. So they've actually called it the Giga kick. Now, much like he can kick legs, Barboza has some great body kicks. But if you're breaking them up, Barboza's the leg man, Giga's the body man. And Barboza, I'd say, probably more likely to be the head kick man too, because he's got some bloody cracker wheel kick. At least one knockout with Terry Adam. Has he got more than one wheel kick knockout in the UFC? I can't remember. I know he's rocked people with it, like Kevin Lee, for example. So, yeah, Battle of the Kicks. The reach is about the same. I believe Giga's 1 inch taller than Barboza, but Barboza has 1 inch longer reach. So it'll be an interesting game there. And look, it is hard to pick because just because Giga hasn't beaten the quality of opponent that Barboza has, he hasn't faced him yet either. So you can't write him off for that. So there's just so many questions up in the air about this one that I don't think you can feel confident picking either way. I am picking Barboza. I'm picking Barboza. That's mainly because I am so impressed with how he's been looking at featherweight. He's got great power. Probably I've seen better hands out of him than I've seen out of Giga. And Giga does have a little question around the gas tank. Like, we know that Barboza can go deep into the 5th and still be going with plenty of energy. Whereas Giga, he tends to slow down in his 3-round fights. So we'll see how that maps out over 5. Usually when people start slowing down in 3-round fights and they get a 5-rounder, they have that in their mind and they do come out a lot more controlled, and they pace themselves better, and they end up going longer into the fight, but they can still tend to gas. So, look, too many unknowns in this one for me to actually lay money down either way. I am picking Barboza, but I also think there's decent value in Giga at $2. I think the line's about right. It came out with a direct pick'em, which I was pretty fine with as well, $1.90 each. Now Giga's at $2 and Edson's at $1.80. And honestly, just whichever way you think you're feeling on that one, if you want to be, have some excitement in the card and bet on someone, I'm tipping Barboza, but I'm not super confident in that tip. So if you're thinking Giga, I'd back you on that, because I think Giga at $2, there is some decent value. And there's some decent value in Edson at $1.80 as well. But I just think there's too many questions either way for me to lay down money on either guy. What I will bet on is it should be a fucking cracker of a fight. Now, Wino, where the bloody hell do you see value on this card? I hear you say. Well, I'll tell you, young man. The best value head-to-head for me is D-Rod, Daniel Rodriguez, to beat Kevin Lee at $2.20. I will admit I'm very high on D-Rod. He's really impressed me since he's come into the UFC. He hasn't beaten anyone the level of Kevin Lee. He hasn't fought the same type of opponents Kevin Lee has. D-Rod's best wins have been against Tim Means and Mike Perry. And look, respectable, especially Tim Means, but it's not at the level of the guys that Lee has lost to, and even some of the dudes he's beaten. That being said, most of Lee's career has been at lightweight. He only had one previous foray into welterweight. That was against RDA, and he got pretty handily out-grappled. My memory of that one was he got just dominated from start to finish. I rewatched it yesterday, and he did a little better than I remembered. In round 1, he was actually the one out-grappling RDA, but he did tend to get gassed by about the second round. He kept fighting decently for the fight, even though being gassed, and it got into the 4th where he got thoroughly out-grappled and choked out because he was too gassed. But he fought pretty well for 3 rounds, even though he did, was going low on the gas tank. So in this 3-rounder versus D-Rod, I don't see him fully gassing out necessarily. But RDA also came up from lightweight, much like Kevin, and he did well at welterweight, but what sent him back down to lightweight was he got totally out-wrestled by guys at the top of the division. Kamaru, Colby, Michael Chiesa. I remember Gilbert Burns beat him pretty soundly, I think. I can't remember if he out-grappled him, but look, those 3 alone completely out-grappled RDA. On the other hand, RDA completely out-grappled guys like Neil Magny. So RDA had the grappling to put it on guys at the kind of top 15 up into the lower top 10 level, but he didn't have enough to be elite at welterweight. So that makes me think that Kevin Lee's not going to have what it takes to be elite at welterweight, especially since grappling is his main go-to discipline. But D-Rod hasn't reached that level yet. D-Rod's kind of on the cusp of that top 15, and he could get there very soon. Now, can he beat someone of the level of Kevin Lee? I think so. That's why I'm picking him. But it still remains that he hasn't done it yet. And Lee has beat some top guys like Francisco Trinaldo, Michael Chiesa, Edson Barboza, who we've got in the main event. And his losses in recent years, anyway, have been to those higher level guys. Guys like, well, you had Al Iaquinta, Tony Ferguson, RDA himself. So these are top level dudes. Now, the reason I'm going with D-Rod is, one, his power. He's got crazy power, and Lee hasn't been knocked out at lightweight, but he's been knocked out once by Leonardo Santos, but most of the time he's had a decent chin at lightweight, although he has been rocked, and we didn't really see his chin get checked at welterweight. So how's he going to deal with someone who's actually got heavy power at welterweight? We just don't know. The other thing about D-Rod is he's a very slow, methodical type fighter getting out there, but once he does land something on you, he tends to get his confidence pretty good and ride that momentum through to the victory, usually through to a finish. His only loss in the UFC was against Nicholas Dalby. I rewatched that one and I thought D-Rod won it, but it was, close enough that you're not crying out robbery. And that's the thing. Dalby did fight quite differently to how I imagine Kevin Lee's going to fight, and made D-Rod come to him more and played the distance game. It was either all the way outside, and he was most of the time, all the way outside trying to pepper him with kicks. I still thought D-Rod landed the better shots with his hands throughout that fight, but that's neither here nor there. Kevin Lee, his strength is going to be in the grappling. Before I get to that, as D-Rod builds, when he gets some good shots off and really rides that momentum, Kevin Lee has been susceptible to opponents with momentum before. He's a good confidence fighter too. When he gets confident, he can really put it on guys. But if guys start styling on him, you can see him wilt to it a little. You see him melt a little bit when guys feel confident and are really putting it on him. So if D-Rod can land a few, I can definitely see that coming. The biggest worry for D-Rod is going to be his takedown defense. He got taken down by Means. He got taken down by Perry. Perry didn't even time it particularly well or, with the most technique on the takedown. He just kind of muscled through it. And Lee's a better wrestler than both of those guys. The other area where Lee's going to have a big advantage is in speed. D-Rod's going to have the power. Lee's going to have the speed. Lee's pretty quick even at lightweight. Welterweight is going to be very fast. They both have very slick jabs. D-Rod tends to use his to kind of set up, get his range to begin with, and then kind of start to set up his combinations. He starts to feel it. Lee tends to use his to get the distance as well, like a lot of people, set up combinations, but also he wants to set up combinations so he can goad you into throwing and then shoot a takedown on you. And Lee's speed definitely transfers to the ground as well. He's very good at getting to dominant positions and holding people down and maintaining positions. One, because of his knowledge on the ground, but two, because of the speed at which he dives towards transitions. And he sees a real urgency when he's on the ground in getting to certain spots. And also he's got really strong and aggressive ground and pound once he can get to a position. If he can get takedowns on D-Rod early in the fight, especially if he can do some damage with ground and pound and start wearing D-Rod down, but also if he's just getting a lot of top time and taking rounds away, that will open up his striking because D-Rod will be too worried about the takedown. So that could be a real avenue for Lee. Now, the other spot on the ground where Lee's particularly good is on the back. Like, he's one of the best on the back once he gets there. So you've got avenues for Lee to win. He doesn't tend to lose against guys at D-Rod's level. The last guy around D-Rod's level that Lee fought, I'd say, would be Gregor Gillespie. And I'd say Gregor Gillespie was at a higher level than when he fought Lee than D-Rod is now. And Lee came out there and knocked him out with a head kick in the first round. As I said, his losses have been to the upper echelon. So will that be the case again here? Who knows? If it was at lightweight, I'd be leaning more on the yes side and leaning more towards Lee. But we just haven't seen Lee at welterweight, and we have seen D-Rod get good wins at welterweight and show that he has strong welterweight power. I'm slightly picking him either way in this. The fact that he's 220, I'm actually putting money down on him. I put $30 on him head-to-head at 220. Come on, D-Rod, you're my pick of the card. So where else am I seeing value on the card? Sam Alvey, I'm seeing some value there. I was seeing a bit more value earlier in the week before I started scouting and whatnot. Not so much that the scouting changed my mind, it pretty much solidified what I was already thinking, but it's that the market has brought Alvey down since I started looking. He was up around the 230 mark when I was looking. He's down at 205 now. So 205 for Alvey to win head-to-head. I think Turman, who he's fighting, is at like 177 or something. I can't remember. But either way, I'm not worried too much about that because I'm not recommending that you bet on Turman either way. If you're going to bet on this one, bet on Alvey. But betting on him head-to-head is a worry because it's just so hard to bet on Alvey. Even the fights he wins, they're always pretty close. Like if you've ever bet on an Alvey fight, it's a tense experience. Unless he like lands one of his big corkers and knocks someone out, and then you're just like stoked. All right, got the knockout. It's sweet. But Alvey's fights almost always look the same, and it's him kind of backing up and circling around the cage with the other guy pressing forward, and Alvey just lets the fight come to him too much. He lets fights get away with him for that reason. He doesn't have the urgency. This dude, and the other thing is his recent streak is 0-5-1. That's no wins, 5 losses, and 1 draw in his last 6 fights. So his last fight was his first fight back at middleweight after a bit of a stint up at light heavy. The 1 draw, so all those other losses were at light heavy. The 1 draw was to Da Un Jung, who's looking good, and most people think Alvey won that fight. He also had a split decision against Ryan Spann in there, who's looking really good. He lost to Little Nog. Like, none of these guys are at Wellington Turman's level. And, they're all... Wellington Turman's not at their level, is what I meant to say. And Alvey competes closely with them, and he also has wins over some legit dudes too. Now, the biggest thing for me, that's a big reason why it's hard to bet on Alvey. He's had so many losses, so to say, jump on a 205 of a guy who hasn't, a bet at 205 of a guy who hasn't won in his last 6 fights, like, it's hard to do, and I'd be hesitant to do it too. But where I am seeing some value is in Alvey by knockout, because he has not lost that power. That's something he's always had. He has struggled with grapplers at middleweight. Most of his losses at middleweight have been to grapplers, although he's beaten a lot of grapplers there too. And this Turman kid is a grappler. But Turman is 1-3 in the UFC. He's had 4 fights. He's lost 3 of them. The 1 win was against Marcus Perez in a really close fight. And Marcus Perez is all right, but he's not the greatest fighter ever himself. So, although Alvey's been on a bad streak lately, he's done a lot more in the organisation and the division than Turman has. And Turman has been knocked out in his last 2 fights. Got knocked out by Bruno Silva from guard in his last fight, and got knocked out by Andrew Sanchez in the fight before that. And Sanchez is more of a grappler, not exactly known for his hands. So the fact that Alvey has this fight-stopping power, the fact that the kid he's fighting has been knocked out in his last 2 fights, and the fact that Alvey by KO is $4 makes me say that's where the value is on this card. I think Alvey by knockout at $4, if you're into having a bit of a gamble, is worth a gamble. I'm personally putting $10 on it to win 30, get 40 back. So you get your 10 back plus 30. So yeah, Alvey by knockout, I think is good value. For any of you daredevils out there, I do see value in another spot on the card. I'm personally not going to back it, but Abdul Razak Al Hassan at $3 over Alessio Di Chirico is some value, if you ask me. The reason I'm not backing this one is because unlike pretty much every other one on the video so far that I've said are close fights, but I'm leaning one way and there's good value on the way I'm leaning, so I'm going to jump on that. This one, I'm not leaning towards Alessio Di Chirico. I'm definitely picking him, but I'm not picking him at the level where I think he should be at $1.38 and Abdul Razak Al Hassan should be at $3. That's for sure. I know Alessio Di Chirico had a very impressive head kick knockout of Joaquin Buckley in his last fight, took all that momentum, but he was on a 3-fight losing streak before that. Abdul Razak Al Hassan, I believe, is currently on a 3-fight losing streak. The thing about Al Hassan is, if you can survive the first round, this has been the story for his entire MMA career. If you can survive the first round, you will win. But that first round is a motherfucker to get out of. I forget exactly how many. I think he's got like 10 wins all by knockout in the first round. He's been knocked out once in the first round, and he's had 3 fights go past round 1. All 3 of those went to a decision, and he lost all 3 decisions because he's got the Hector Lombard problem. He is really hard to deal with in that first round with his power and his fast twitch muscles, but he goes way too hard and he gasses himself out. So if you can survive that first round, you're gonna win if his record's anything to go by. Now, Di Chirico has never been knocked out, so could he survive that first round? Certainly. He's survived every other first round he's ever fought. He's survived every other round he's ever fought. And this is the main reason that I'm going with Di Chirico. One, he's got that better cardio. He's never been knocked out. And I feel like he's got enough veteran nous to survive that first round with Abdul Razak Al Hassan and be able to take it over from there. But just the X factor of that power on Al Hassan, there's always a chance. There's always a chance he's going to get it. And at $3, I think there is a little value on taking a gamble on him. He's at $3.75 to win by knockout, which is decent value as well. But if you're a real daredevil, if you're a real adrenaline junkie, he's at $7 by knockout in the first round. So that might be something you'd like to have a jump on. So a bit rich for my taste this week. I mean, I've jumped on stuff worse than that, but things are tight in the bloody 8th or 9th week of this lockdown at this point. So I'm going to steer clear of that one this week. But if you're willing to have a flutter, Abdul Razak Al Hassan, especially by round 1 knockout, could be some money there for you. Yeah, that's my wrap of the card. If you want to know where my money went on this one, I put $30 on D-Rod to beat Kevin Lee head-to-head. That was at $2.20, so paying $66 if it wins. $10 on Sam Alvey by knockout over Turman. That was at $4, so paying $40 if it wins. And then I put a multi on. I always like to put at least one multi. I've usually got a few multis going on the card. This week I wasn't really seeing where I was going to put it on, but I wanted to put one on either way, so I got Alvey, so Sam Alvey once again, Andre Petrosky, D-Rod, and Edson Barboza, all head-to-head at $9.57, so $10 on that to win $95.70. Fingers crossed. Either way, I think it's going to shape up to be a good card. If the season is anything to go by, the fights, the Ultimate Fighter fights anyway, should be great because the boys have been bringing it all season. And Barboza versus Chikadze, I mean, how can that be a bad fight? Famous last words, you always say that, there's no way this one can be boring, then it ends up being it. But I don't think that'll happen in this one. This should be an absolute cracker. And then some more fun fights on the card. I'm looking forward to that Abdul Razak Al Hassan fight. Looking forward to the D-Rod versus Kevin Lee fight. Looking forward to Alvey's fight. Always like seeing Alvey. And looking forward to every fight on the card. So, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I could help you win some money a little bit. We'll find out afterwards if my tips were good or dog shit. And yeah, I'll catch you next time.